All right, everybody, it's the big episode, the one I've been waiting for a very, 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 very long time, the one I've had wanting to do in my visions for like 5 years now. I got Thorin. He's here, esports historian, master of banter, master of lots of different things. And we're having a great conversation today. We're going to go into a bunch of different stuff. I'm going to ask him some questions, a bit more, you get a lot of questions about esports and stuff like that. So I'm going to try to focus on some stuff that I know you really like to talk about, but you don't really get a chance to talk about publicly that much. So Thorin, how you doing?
Yeah, not too bad, Matt.
So, one thing that, we're doing research for this show and whatnot. You touched on this a bit, I think, in the Lambros cast too. I was looking at your YouTube channel, watching your older Thorin's Thoughts videos and seeing how you've progressed and just the change in just like 3 or 4 years from, if you watch the old episodes, it's in that dark room, you're very quiet, your voice is, you're not as explosive with your hand.
It's more like an ASMR video, wouldn't it? I was like, yeah. This is what's going to happen in the next, for sure.
And then now you're doing full on acting. It's, you got that energy, the life's in your eyes. You're going off, you're changing your voice. You're doing all this stuff. The personality is really showing. So what was kind of that transition like for you? What were you doing to get to that point, and kind of how did it feel as you were progressing through the stages?
Well, one of the things that I do in my life is I never do that approach where it's like, right, before I start, I've got to like read a guide, and then I've got to like watch a video, and then I've got to like, what's the best camera set? And then people love, by the way, to just put things off like, but I'd need to have like the lighting, and then like, I don't know if the mic quality is. What I do is this, right? When I have an idea, I just do it, no matter how scoffed it is, no matter how lo-fi it is, no matter how bad it is. And my logic goes like this: I will get better by doing it badly. I'll get to do it slightly decent. Then I'll be mediocre. Then I might be average. Then I might be slightly good. And if I keep going, as long as I'm not an idiot just bashing my head against the wall, eventually I'm going to figure it out, Like just trial and error alone is a super powerful technique. So what probably a lot of people wouldn't understand is when you say like in just 3 or 4 years, you see like the evolution. Mate, the amount of reps I put in, like I body everyone else in my industry. Like I used to have this line where like I used to have rivals. Yeah, then I put like 1,000 videos between me and them. Like what are they going to do? Like, listen, doesn't mean all 1,000 videos are better than theirs, but you know what? You could pick the 800 you don't think are good, and I'll still have 200 that are better. Like, give me a break. Like, if people don't know, on my YouTube channel, I do, interviews, talk shows. I do a bunch of different content. But the main thing that it started with was sort of like vlog type, I'd almost say like half video essay sort of things, which is the Thorin's Thoughts series. I think that's something like 1,600 episodes now. So if you put in that many reps, you better get good. Like I say, you'd almost have to be an idiot not to. So, like a lot of people in a lot of industries, I'm not like a guy who's a genius and just figured it out and just, came out the womb doing this. I put in mad hours and a lot of thought to doing it. And also I've noticed personally, I tend to learn better, like unconsciously, as in I do things. And it's like, what's weird is I've even found I can read books and read techniques, and without actually even consciously thinking, they'll just work their way into what I'm doing. Or I'll watch someone who's a speaker, for example, and somehow I'll start to just pick up some of the things that seem like they were doing that sort of made intuitive sense to me. I think intuition is a big deal, Anything that sort of vibes for me, it just kind of integrates into me.
Right. Have you heard about that concept, force versus power?
No.
Okay, basically, the difference between force and power is real power is when it's almost like an attraction, and the what you're trying to learn, what you're trying to gain just comes to you. Whereas with force, there's resistance because you're this is in a lot of like consciousness work and stuff like that.
Right.
There's resistance because you're so focused on it, you're so in your conscious mind, you're trying to do the things to get it, and it's not sinking in. You're not allowing yourself the time to relax and let it kind of pour and get inside of your brain and whatnot, and get into and actually become habits.
Oh, that's another thing that people were probably very shocked by. A lot of people assume that like any good joke I have, he must have written that down. You know, must have had that stored. They'll assume like if I've sent you like it's actually happened. There was a guy who was a coach in League of Legends, and he had a year where he didn't have a job. So he asked me like, "Can you give me some tips?" Because I knew him like on how to make videos and how do you do it? I said, you know what? I'll send you one of my scripts. Now, when I say script, like an entire part that I might have done like a 5-paragraph rant is just one word. It just goes like Carrigan, and then I just that just triggers my mind to go, right, that's what I'm going to talk. So he was going like, where's the script? I was like, that is the script. He's like, well, what goes from there? I go, the whole point is, mate, if no one wants to see you reading, it's not it's not a book reading. Like the idea is it's supposed to be inside you already, and this just brings it out, that triggers what you're going to talk about. So almost everything I do is intuitive, basically. Like I try to basically train the intuition to perform the way I want it to. And actually what you're saying there about like the concept of like force as power, one of the other things as well is I do the same when I'm playing games as well, the same as I do when I'm doing broadcast stuff. I just trust that it's there. I don't go in like, oh, I've got to keep hold of this and this and this, and I'm trying to spin million plates. No, like if I had a great point and then I was listening to this guy and it's gone, then it wasn't that great a point, was it? I'm sure another one's coming along. Let's pick another thing that's there, or let's start. Let's see where we go to. That's another thing. When I used to be an interviewer, when I first started, I was like everyone. I was super nervous. If it got like an awkward moment, my brain would be like, probably should shut the interview down now. What I learned to do eventually was, this is an interesting concept for people who work on camera. I learned that just like the classic like Einstein thing, probably one of the few things that guy ever said that was reasonable. When he famously said that, basically like if you put your hand on a hot stove, time feels really quick. But when it feels really long. Yeah. But when you look at a beautiful woman, it feels really quick. It's like the idea of, perception is relative. Well, one of the things that really affects people who work on camera is you're inside your own head when you're thinking consciously. So when there's a moment's silence, for you, it's like some movie scene where they've taken like peyote or something. You'll be like, holy shit, it's been 1,000 years since anyone talked. Dude, if you just watch on camera, no one even noticed you hadn't talked yet. You just had your mouth closed for half a second, and to you, it felt crazy. So what I had to learn to do was, once I started to notice that feedback, I realized just stay in it. When that happens, just chill, relax, go slow down 10%. No one notices at home, by the way, and just think, I'll get it back. Or if it's gone, let it go. Don't chase it in your mind. Just go, what's the next thing I can move to? What can I ask now? Maybe I can even ask a setup question that'll let it get back to where I want. There's all sorts of techniques you can use that if you then watch back, it'll just look like you talk like 5% slower. There won't be any big deal. No one will go, oh my God. And the second you start talking after the pause, you're back in the moment again. The viewers now listening to you, they're not thinking, oh, that's weird, because a moment ago you paused for 1.5 seconds. Nobody paused for half a second. No one's thinking that. No one's as like, diligent as that. So there's a lot of stuff like that kind of is just going on in the background. You just have to be observant.
Right. So what you said about scripting actually aligns with my philosophy when I'm talking to my video clients and whatnot. Because a lot of like entrepreneurs and whatnot, they have a lot of information in their head. They know exactly how to do it, but they don't know how to convey it. And so their first thought is to write out massive scripts for the videos and whatnot. It's like, no. All that structure is going to do is just add anxiety. It's just going to add constraints. You have it all in here. You just need a little pointer to let you go off. And then also your personality is going to come out more because you're not trying to like force a script for sales or some other arbitrary metric or whatnot. You'll just be able to flow. It'll just be way more natural.
Yeah, I mean, similarly, that's another thing I did. This is what's funny is I don't believe in giving unsolicited advice. I don't do it. Like even when I give I just say what I did basically. And then if it fucks with you, If it doesn't vibe with you, it's probably not for you. Go do something else. Like, I'm not trying to proselytize or convince anyone. There's actually something a bit sinister about people who do in that sense. It's like, why are you trying to get me in your cult, mate? Like, how have you figured it out? Like, why not just say what you did? So basically, one of the things that I've always felt about what you're talking about here is, let me think, what was I going to say on that? About the idea of just going with what's there. Like this is another thing. I didn't follow any of the rules of how you do these things. Like basically what I did was, I'll give you an analogy. It was the equivalent to someone who never learned music, never copied any music, literally just picked up like a classic acoustic guitar, started just strumming around and just did it for so long. They sort of eventually figured out, they don't know what a chord necessarily is musically, but they've actually figured out, that sounds good. And then that sounds like it should go next. And eventually, again, trial and error, you can get pretty advanced. Actually, you can go to some next level. So one of the things I've always done as well is once I start doing something, I don't just go, well, that's not perfect, so stop that. And how do they say to do it? I sort of keep going. Like my idea is like the way out is through. So what I do is when I make videos, for example, go back to the first, I'd say, 2 years of my video channel, there are no cuts, mate. There's no editing. I literally just film it in like a very basic filming thing. And when I press stop, I press stop. If I cough, by the way, I cough, it's in the video. If I have to take a drink, it's in the video. Like I don't cut anything because I had no editing skills at the time. I didn't even know you did that. And at the time, I didn't want to add, time for rendering. I just wanted it to instantly online, like 1 minute later. So as a result, that actually means, if anything, I was skating uphill. Like, think of all the videos. Remember the YouTube meta back in the days there? Everything's an instant fast cut, and they even take all the pauses out. So it's that weird, like, disturbing YouTuber, like MTV.
Yeah, the Ray William Johnson.
Yeah.
Like
you get used to it, But even so, it's something weird about it. It's a bit like how if you ever notice how politicians talk, you go, that is fucking weird. Like, no, you would never talk to a human that way. But you're just programmed to know, I'm watching a YouTube video. I'm watching this thing here. And so basically, I would just do it in one go. So what that meant is I actually had to get probably way better at doing the videos than another guy doing similar level of content just because he edits it. But that's my style, because I did the same with writing. I never learned formal writing. I didn't even know, no joke, that a lot of other people, when they write, they do stuff like, right, I've got the ending, so let me put that part, and then I think it would connect to this part here. I'm going to have to edit that for a second. I didn't even know that, dude. I thought you start on word one, you keep writing, at the end, you put the full stop, and you fucking send it in. Like, so similarly, you go back and look at my early writing, it's going to be all right. But the point is, when you put in mad reps doing this approach, first of all, you'll have a totally unique approach. Like, it's one of the reasons why a lot of people enjoy my writing, because they always go, oh, you have your own voice in it. Yeah, because I wrote from the beginning word to the last word. I just got so good at doing it.
Like the JW piece.
Yeah, that's a perfect example. People don't know. Basically, I was just on an airplane one day and I was listening to, I'm trying to think how you describe it. It's almost like someone had taken like Rumi's poetry, that like Middle Eastern, like fucking mystic or whatever, from like Islamic period. And they'd put it with some like orchestral music, so it sounded fucking epic. Like, and it was obviously if you know his stuff, it's like very sort of airy, and it's all sort of like romantic language and a lot of dream logic woven into it. It's
By the way,
it's religious. Yeah.
Side point: if you like that type of stuff, look up Akira the Dawn. That dude does that. He exclusively does that stuff. We'll take like Alan Watts, Terrence McKenna, Scott Adams and stuff. It'll put it with like amazing beats. Really, it's more like lo-fi than orchestral, but similar concept and whatnot. But yeah, continue.
Yeah, basically, I was just listening to this on a plane, and then I realized, like, I was having like a cool idea. Like, oh, imagine if you wrote about like a CS player like this. Like, instead of just being like, he is this good a player, this is his style, here is what he did. Imagine if you just did basically stream of consciousness about the player, and instead, what you did is you removed everything about the game. You don't talk about the AWP. No one knows what fucking AWP is. You make it like, what is the essence of that player? Because one of the things I learned from games and sports is the most fascinating part about the player is nothing to do with their real life. My joke always is, who gives a fuck about a 17-year-old kid from Sweden who's just not very good with girls? You care about what he does in the server, right? But the area where they do interface from the real world with the guy in the server is their personality and their philosophy. And what you'll find is personality traits and character traits literally manifest in how people play. The guy who's very conservative, he tends to be quite nervous under pressure. The guy who's a free-flowing but all-out guy, not very cerebral, he's probably incredibly skilled and only knows how to run through brick walls like the Juggernaut. Like, you'll find this. So basically, I tried to capture some of that essence and start weaving it into this piece. And I just wrote a stream of consciousness piece. It's probably the weirdest piece I've ever written. But the point is, if you can at all get into the vibe of it, you'll go somewhere that none of my other pieces do.
Oh, it really is excellent. And this actually parlays with something I wanted to talk about later, but I think would be good to bring up now, is what you brought about, like player essences and how their personalities imbue in the game and whatnot. One little thought exercise that I've been doing just on my own is, like, I've been comparing greats of MMA to like what would be their CSGO counterparts in. So I had like Device would be George St. Pierre, Simple, like I'm guessing is John Jones, Shocks, Anderson Silva, Cold Zera. Who did I put down for Cold Zera? Cold Zera was Habib, right? And I was making these things, trying to just do these loose comparisons. I know it's a team game, it doesn't really perfectly work, but it got me thinking, like, the patterns to their greatness. They're all great. They're all in debate, in constant debate for being the GOAT, but they're all so wildly different and whatnot. So, like, what are to you, from you watching sports and being on this earth way longer than I have, what are the essences and the patterns of greatness in personalities, in, how people approach sports and games and life and all that stuff?
By the way, never worry about putting that caveat in. Like, this metaphor is not identical, but it's not a one-to-one. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a metaphor, would it? Like, I always say on that one, if you say he's so fast, he's a horse, the guy can't go, doesn't eat oats though, does he? Like, that's just fucking shit. Like all the person then's telling you they don't know what a metaphor is. So when you do that though, the other secret is this. This is why if you can build up a personality and a brand, it will be even more powerful what you do there. Because what you actually will be doing, because by the way, anytime you ever do those, this is why you don't read Twitter replies. There'll be a million replies where they'll find a way that Cold Zero isn't exactly like Habib. But we talk about like Habib's like actually quite a tall guy and he can box as well. You know what I mean? They'll find a way to misunderstand everything so they're smarter than you. So what you do basically is you're not just describing how that person relates to him. You are on the surface level, but you're also basically telling me how you view those people. That's in some ways more interesting, because the notion is, what is, like you're saying, what is the essence of Habib to you? What is the essence of Cold Zero? Like that's what, part of what you get into is that. It's not just a cool analogy. It's also good for the analogy part, obviously, because then if someone knows one, they're going to get a sense of like what the other one must be like. Basically, part of it to me is you want to look at things like you want to literally speculate how this player perceives himself, which, by the way, is actually very easy to do in most games. You can see by what shots they go for, in what scenarios they tighten up a bit. If they're in a team game, do they seem like they demand resources? Do they seem like they're very selfless? These things all tend to flow both into their character and, crucially, it's how they perceive the game. And that's the reason why I think every sport, if you were to list any top 10 like GOAT candidates in any sport, mate, there's more difference between them than the average fighter. So what's mad is if you made a talent funnel, you know, you're going from like 100,000 people down to 10, you would think that the 100,000 should be the crazy. No, most of them will be very similar in many ways.
Right.
The reason why, this is what I'm kind of like bringing it back to here. The reason why at the bottom of the funnel, they're going to be radically different. Like those names you listed there was almost nothing that is similar between all of them. Like even if you try to force it, like, well, Habib and GSP sort of ground and pound, not in any way the same, is it?
No.
Like that's one of the reasons everyone wanted to see that fight. It wouldn't be a fucking mirror match. Like it'd be actually, even within that little, even if that little domain, they're so different. So the thing to me that's interesting is, this is one of our secrets. I've never tried to be like anyone else. Now, I'm not doing it like, because I knew I was the best. Like, I didn't know who I was at the time. I was still making myself. But one thing I learned was this. If you do it your way, and that doesn't mean you specifically go, I'm not going to do it. Just you do it the way that makes sense to you, the way that calls to you. Then when you get good, you are now going to be good in such a unique manner that nobody can do your stuff the way you do it. And that's what every one of these greats does. Every single great in sports has unique elements, totally unique to them, that nobody can copy, or if they do, they're going to be like a bad copy. And essentially, the essence that is within them makes them uniquely good in certain regards. They're a different talent stack, they're a different combination. The style that they have, style is nearly always the most defining element, right?
Sure.
Like every one of those people, they don't really have sort of a core aspect that even ties with their peer group.
Right. I mean, that's why I put for, George St. Pierre and Device, that stuck out to me because there was always that story where, I think he told us on Joe Rogan where George was watching a tape of BJ Penn and he was timing his reactions and whatnot. And he realized that, he's really good at, I forgot what it was. He was really good at checking the leg kick, but he was not really good at like bringing it back or whatever. So he knew he was able to counter with a cross or a jab or something like that. And that reminded me exactly of when Device perfectly coded Fallen at that PGL major and just like absolutely neutralized him the entire game, and just how the Astrala system works and all that stuff. So it's like, it's really cool to see the patterns, just echo throughout the, throughout a bunch of different sports and whatnot. It's so cool.
Sure.
So the other thing I wanted to hit on is just before, and then I'd like to transition into some of your thoughts on art and whatnot. What really compelled you to step out of your comfort zone when you were starting, in doing your early, stuff with ESEA, SK Gaming and whatnot, just doing more of the writing, and then you kind of shifted into, I think you did a little bit of commentary too, and then you shifted more, and then you went full on into analyst and then content creation and whatnot. And I assume that Thorin in 2000 would look at Thorin today and be like, oh, like that, right? Like that's what I have to get to. Okay, what are the things I have to get better at and all this stuff? So what compelled you to be like, okay, I gotta keep going. I gotta go forward. This is the way to ascend.
I mean, this is the beauty. This is why I hate victimhood, mate, is my entire life was like overcoming challenges that sometimes didn't even exist for other people. So like if I didn't step out my comfort zone, I'd never have put a word on the internet. I'd never have been in a video. I'd never have attempted to interview people who knew way more than me and I was a beginning. Like I'd never do anything. It's why I don't, basically anyone who says like I'm a victim, what they're saying is I refuse to move from this position until the entire world elevates me to where I should be in my mind. Like that's probably the most spoiled scenario you can ever be in. Like if you notice people who are real victims, they don't even think they are. They think that something bad happened. They're trying to get their way out of it. And then maybe an outside observer goes, that's fucked up what happened to you. Let's help you. That's a very different scenario. You know, it's why it's not about don't be a victim. It's about don't have a victimhood mentality. So basically to even do things on the internet was stepping outside my comfort zone. Like I'm a guy with no social skills. Like mate, in theory, journalism ain't the space for you if you've got no social skills. It's supposed to all be about networking and like, you know, how you ask the questions and all this. I wasn't doing that. I was just coming in straight up, just asking a question I want. Might be in the most nerdy way ever. The player might even be thinking like, he's going a bit too deep on that. And I just feel a fucking Counter-Strike. But the point is I was just going and seeing if there's anything there. And I kept pushing and following. Basically, I always say this. My superpower is actually one I think everyone has. They just don't tap into it. It's just curiosity. Have you ever noticed, right? You can get a book. Think of any classic book. It could be like War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. Could be like, I don't know, fucking 1984 by George Orwell. There'll be these books that you, in your brain, when you're an intellectual young man, you go, I've got to read that at one point in time. I've got to have, you know, have that in my arsenal. I've got to be able to tell people in polite conversation, oh, of course I've read Orwell's 1984. But you know what? Sometimes the period in life when you sit down with that book, you flick it up and you go, fucking hell, this is hard work. Oh God, I'm not even on page 10 yet. Does it ever get interesting? But part of your brain's going, but I need to read it. Drop those books immediately. That ain't for you right now. Maybe it will be one day, by the way. And by the way, the best thing is you won't have to, as an affectation, tell yourself to read it. If it is for you one day, it'll call to you from the shelf. I'm not joking. You walk past the seat and go, that's exactly the time to read it. Instead, you pick up a book. Now, if you're a beginner reader, just start with something simple. I always tell people, the one I always recommend is Ender's Game because it's for fucking teenagers, but it's straight fire. It's got a fucking banging storyline and it's got some depth there. So if you can go there, you can go there. And if you don't need to, you can stay on the surface level. So I always tell people basically in the same way as with a book like that, if you start reading it and instantly it hooks you, a character hooks you, a theme hooks you, you want to know what's happening on the next 4 pages. It's easy to read. It's the opposite. You're compelled to read through it. It's almost magnetic. Dude, you'll be like falling asleep going, oh shit, and trying to read 5 more pages before you sleep. Instead, if you pick up the book that, you know, feels like a chore, you're going to have to be pushing yourself. That's like someone whipping you from behind instead of going for the carrot, isn't it? So I do that with all my work as well. I always just tried to go. It might look like a challenging area because I'm going into an area I'm not good in. I have no skill set. But the reason I went in there wasn't because I was like, I better bloody learn how to do video. It was like, wait a minute, the best interviews at the moment that are different from all the text ones I've done, it's going to be in the video domain. So if I want to do that, why don't I try and do one this guy? He's really interesting. I think I could probably, I probably vibe with this guy enough. That sort of worked. I'll try this guy now. And again, I always just put in the reps. Like I did loads of bad video reviews, of course. Point is, I did so many that now there's thousands and thousands between those. And you probably can't even find the original ones. There's another classic piece of advice people ignore. Make all your mistakes at the beginning. But unfortunately, everyone on some level is a narcissist. Like everyone who hits send to a piece of work on the internet, I know everyone at home now is going to go, surely not. Even when they're a beginner, a rank amateur really believes like, oh God, what's the world going to think of this? Not even going to click it, mate. What the fuck are you talking about? 4 people are going to click it. They're going to go, this is boring, click off. So make all your mistakes then when no one's watching. And then by the time people actually start watching, you're going to have some skills. You're going to have some chops. You're going to have your feet underneath you, you know. Right. That's one of the reasons why when people bombard me, and they do it all the time, mate, they say they're fans of mine, right? And so they want to be like me. I don't even know what the fuck that means, mate. You don't have no idea what my life is like or what it was like. So, and you know, be careful what you wish for on that one. Like, you wouldn't want to reincarnate as me, I'm telling you. So when you do that, though, I always tell these people when they're like, oh, but how do I do this? And then what do I do that? It's like, first of all, who the fuck says I know? Am I some God that came down from heaven? No, I figured it out myself. And then secondly, like, you're just asking that to prevent yourself going through the process of learning for yourself. You want to know basically that, oh, can you just give me like the breadcrumbs for all the steps you took? It's like, how about fucking do it yourself, mate? It's like that Joseph Campbell thing. You go into the forest where it's the darkest and no one else has cut their way through because you're going to find your own way to the grail. You're not just going, what's the way to the grail? Where's the signposts at? It's like, that's kind of the whole point of it, mate, is like the journey inside you. It's not the end goal that you get to, is it?
That's something I had to learn is that, you know, if I like somebody, if I really, respect what they're doing and whatnot, I can't just go, okay, what did they do exactly? And I'm going to just follow exactly what they're doing and I'll get right. No, you have to take the principles of what they did. Okay. They display hard work. I really respect their hard work, but I'm not really interested in their domain that they're in. Doesn't mean you have to go in their domain then. You could just take those principles and put them in your own. And, it takes some thinking, it takes some intuition, it takes some introspection and knowing what you want, but it's the only right path. If you just follow blindly your idols and whatnot, you're going to get extremely disappointed because nothing will end up aligning at all.
It's actually how I got into esports, because what people wouldn't know is at the same time as my initial couple of years that I was foraging into the field, but actually doing work, not just consuming stuff from websites, I was doing a degree course in computer science. And the whole reason I did this course is because when I was a teenager, I read this book. It's a banging book, by the way. It's called Hackers by Stephen Levy. And it's this like journalist who comes into the world of computing, and he does like a history of like the computer from when they're like at MIT with these massive supercomputers all the way through to like the home computer revolution. And then eventually I think he ends maybe like around the 80s with like the Mac or whatever, and basically you think to yourself when you start out, this book's a bit boring because he's starting out with like the beginning concept of a computer, but then believe it or not, the moment he gets to MIT, it becomes an amazing book because you meet all these people who are just like super shy, antisocial young men, but they're geniuses at computer programming. And they're just doing stuff like, they're not just doing their degree course at MIT. They just then like stay all night long during the night and then code their own shit and like making games and fucking programs and stuff. And eventually they all get jobs there. So then they can just like actually afford to do all this stuff. And basically I was reading this book going, fuck, this is me. Like that's how I am. I feel like, I don't have any outlet, but like this must be it. So the computer's it, right? The computer is the tool to do it with. And then I went and I did computer programming. I was like, this is boring as fuck. There's none of this shit. And I was looking around the room. There's not a single one of those guys in this room. Everyone in there is another guy just going like, I'm going to get a job as a programmer. I've heard it's got £25,000 a year starting. So I'm like, what the fuck? Where's all the passion? Where's all that? And what I had to realize was I wasn't hooked on anything about computers, mate. I was hooked on the concept that these guys had found a way to purely express their imagination because their skill set was good enough. And what basically went off as a light bulb was this. I already know a programming language. It's called English. Why don't I just fucking use that? I've already sort of got a bit of a head start on that one, haven't I? When I tried to learn C, that's really hard. I'm still stuck on bozo shit at the beginning where I can like run one routine or something. So I quickly realized like I was vibing with the wrong part of it.
Right.
So it's why I actually think inspiration is the most misunderstood aspect ever. A classic example from our field would be this. In the old days, if you ever watched like the old 1.6 scene, because we didn't have streaming and we didn't have YouTube videos for most of it, a massive thing was people making an actual video file of a frag movie, right? It'd have like fucking Linkin Park soundtrack and then it'd be all badly edited. Those old ones, yeah, of course. And basically, it's no joke. One of the things that ruined that scene was you would get these people who had talent at making video stuff and they wanted to put loads of hours into all the editing. But their idea of inspiration, no joke, was to just take the same song from the video they really liked and put it in their song and their movie. And it was like, dude, you missed it. You missed the point. The point was find a song that makes you feel like that fits your movie. Otherwise, you've just copied some shit from him. So I always think a lot of people tried to come into my field because they fuck with what I do. No, what you're fucking with is maybe the idea that like I think differently than other people. I'm not afraid to say what I think, or I have my own approach to it. So basically take the essence of that out, throw away all the dross, which is whoever I am and my particular style of humor and things that I do that you wouldn't do, and then just apply it to your life.
The funniest thing that I've seen, just I've been watching and consuming esports for 5 years, and there's always the guy that always like the low level commentator or analyst or pundit or whatever that tries to make a Thorin's Thoughts show, and they'll call it like
loads of them.
Yeah, you call it like Tommy's Talks or whatever like that, and they try to copy the form, and they're done after like 5 episodes because they're like, oh fuck, it's boring. I'm not getting anything. It's like you already lost. You didn't even try.
Oh, for sure.
They didn't even get a chance to, develop their personality inside the video. They're like, oh, I'm not Thorin. Gave up. I'm done.
And they haven't learned this lesson, but they all would if they kept going, learn the lesson, which I had to learn myself. And as you pointed out in the beginning of the video, if you went back and watched the first story, it's not going to be that good, mate. Like, I'm going to have a few points in it. And the fact that no one was doing that back then is going to make it novel, but it ain't going to be like actually some like straight fire content. Because even back then I had to learn the basic skill set of what I was doing. Like one of the things that is probably the most misunderstood thing I see in all young men is they really do genuinely believe that having an idea in your brain is 99% of it, and 1% of it's getting it into the real world. If you've ever had an idea, it's about 1% and 99% is trying to get in the real world, and no one hits 99%. And in fact, the better you get at it, even doing like an 80% feels like, fuck that part up, I scoffed it. And everyone else is going, it's genius, it's the best thing you've ever done. You're like, dude, if you knew what I was trying to get out, this is fucking, I've fucked the ending here. You know, I couldn't get it to go how I wanted, but I can't figure out how to do it. Like, that's the thing, because I feel like it's that stupid thing of why it's one of the things I've done in my career. I almost never announce things. I don't go, I'm starting this new project like this. I just do it. One day it just drops. It comes on the internet and it's there. Because otherwise, right, when you say to people, I'm going to start a diet, or I'm going to the gym now, you get a little kick the second they tell you, oh, good for you. You've just got like 80% of the fucking satisfaction you would get at the end, the delayed gratification. And once you've got that, because it's now diminishing returns to actually, you know, make it undergo the formality of being, you're probably not going to do it at that point. You're going to go, well, whatever, I've sort of got the thing. And that's why everyone who's creative has a million unfinished products and they have a million things. You know what? If you went on my computer, I've got loads of video ideas I never made. I have almost no videos that ever got archived, mate. Like, they're all on the internet. I finish them all. Even if they're not that good, I finish them because I want to learn the lesson. I even want to publish it and find out it wasn't as good as I thought. I want to do all that shit. That's the best way to learn. Definitely.
So, you know, one thing that you touched on in the beginning of that was the, you know, kind of your as you were developing your social skills and whatnot, you know, the networking, right? I've always thought about that. You know, what was networking like for you, and especially in esports? You know, just getting the opportunities, getting the jobs and whatnot, and meeting you know, certain key power players. How did you go about doing that throughout your career?
I mean, I was probably the worst in the whole industry at that. Basically, I did it again, the hardest possible route that you could take. Because what I did was, since I had no social skills, another classic trait of young men here, I just made it like, right, I'm going to define the only metric that matters is how good you are at game knowledge. Because game knowledge is the only thing I had. I wasn't even that good at writing and doing videos yet, so I couldn't do that, right? Someone else might be better at video than me who doesn't have my game knowledge. But I can always feel superior to him because, I would have said something different. I was the fucking reply guy. We all were, by the way. You have to grow out that phase, basically. So similarly, right, when I was trying to do all this content, I was in a scenario where it was, where was I starting on that one? Wait a second. The networking part, yes. Yeah. So basically, what I did as a result was I even built all these mad coping mechanisms in my brain. Like, anyone who isn't quite as good at the content, but they have like a better presentation, they have like a better camera, you know, they're suave with people. It's like, he's just, what a sellout bitch. Like, look, he's just fucking, he's just kissing his ass. Is he like, oh yeah, you have to put like fucking entertainment in yours. I'm purist. I'm fucking hardcore, mate. I'm not like that. I'm not like you. That was my shit, right? So basically, in the early days, I was ridiculous, mate. I would just do stupid shit. Like, when someone was like, I quite like some of your work, but I didn't like this. I'd be like, go fuck yourself then. It's like, that's another, burn that bridge then. And then what happened was I had to basically make it purely from being super, super good at like certain areas, only certain areas of my job. Like, maybe I go so deep into the history, I know more than the history about anyone, or maybe I can write about the game in a way other people can't. And basically, I was doing like the most ridiculous, like my funnel was this tiny, mate. It was 10 people down to 5. And what I was doing was, there was only 10 people in the industry could stand me and basically vibed with me that were like, I sort of see what you're doing there. Yeah, you're pretty good actually at that area. And then I had to rely on the first like 10 years from one of the 10 people, usually it'd only be 4 or 5, having a job they could give me. And then when they gave me that job, we could work together for a few years, and I would have to go to another person. And I did survive from this for a long time. You know, when I got dropped from one person, it's like another one would just come out of the sky and pick me up over here and go, I always fucked what you're doing. Now, the problem with that is that's probably the least efficient way to network your skills, because what you've done is you've turned off all the people who might have been into it. You haven't even attempted to engage people who would be by being social, by talking a bit, etc. Blah, 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 blah. I will say most of our social skills, I actually leveled up. Again, I never do it consciously. I never sit down and go, I've got to level up this aspect here. I just, again, follow my curiosity. I try to do things that make me improve. And I tend to just trip over and go, fuck, it's like the Matrix, like, I know how to fly a helicopter. It just feels like, what the fuck? I didn't even notice I was doing that. So one of the things I did was I actually worked on social skills just to be able to do better interviews. Because when I was doing video interviews, listen, when it's a text interview, we all know what it's like if you're on MSN Messenger, right? You sit there, the girl, it's just saying Stacey is typing. You're like, how fucking long is she typing for? And you think it's going to be a novel, right? And it's like, lol, what's that? It's like, oh, she just backspaced it all for 7 minutes. Like, thinking of the perfect comment to make, because anyone could do that, right? We all come off 10 times better. But you tell you what, put them in front of a video, you can't do that. There's no please. You can't do that, can you?
Yeah, I interviewed that. There's because I really want to get into esports, and do like esports journalism and stuff in like 2016, 2017 area when I was still in high school. And I got in contact with that Brazilian 1.6 player, Thorin from MIBR. And I did one of those text interviews with him. And it was the exact same thing. We were on Steam. I was Steam messaging him, trying to get it off because I didn't want to do a video call and like actually talk to him and whatnot. It was surreal. It was surreal.
Yeah, but that's the point. It's like you can look a lot better when you can control the time, what the exact thing says. You can think all the ways to phrase the question. But the point is, how are you going to do that when you're in person? Right. So, for example, some of the things I learned had fuck all to do with like trying to improve networking, but it eventually became the skills. So, for example, how do you engage someone who seems a little bit resistant, a little bit hostile initially? How do you open them up? What questions get you in there so they relate and then they start to tell you what they really think, or you engage them in a way that brings them out of their shell? So I've always told people this. I did things like study pickup artists, study what poker tells are, what someone's face means when they do that expression. And again, obviously, I didn't take the poker part. I don't play poker. I didn't take the pickup part. It did help for meeting women, I have to say afterwards, but that was a nice byproduct, wasn't it? Yeah. Basically, it's like one of the things, if people don't know in the like pickup community, is that stopped about 10 years ago being creepy nerds just trying to pick women up, because what people eventually realized was, the real way you pick up women, you just learn to talk to humans, and your women are humans as well. And eventually, once you level up and you feel comfortable talking to humans, your grandma, a fucking postman, the guy at the chip shop, eventually it's easy to go, hey, how are you doing? And then next thing you know, the conversation started. So leveling up any skill, essentially, if you do it right, slightly levels up all your skills.
Exactly. And I'm going to somehow transition this into art, because this is what I want to hit on with you, right? So one artist that you actually introduced me to was Alejandro Jodorowsky. Sure. And for me, I'm more into films personally, but I do want to get some of his comics and whatnot, and really, because the art just looks unbelievable.
Oh, the mega.
And I just wanted to get your thoughts on, specifically the films El Topo, The Holy Mountain, and whatnot, just like the unbelievable amounts of symbolism in there. I think that, honestly, he only made a handful of films. He wasn't that prolific of a director. At least, he made some didn't he make some romantic film recently? He did
a couple of films recently, but they're not really at all like the 70s shit that you
right
stuff.
I think that if you watch Jodorowsky, you watch Kubrick, and you watch David Lynch, and you get those three guys, their whole filmography, you really understand a lot about how the world works and how art and all this stuff and media functions in our world. So, what kind of introduced you to Jodorowsky, and why did he pique your interest?
Right. Basically, one of the few upsides of working in esports in terms of a tangible benefit in the old school days is you spend all your time on a computer. This is before they would send you to events a lot of the time. You'd just be at home like an editor, doing posts, searching databases, putting things online. It meant that basically you couldn't leave your house, but as a result, you also had a lot of free time in and amongst the things you were doing. Like if you did some of your work early in the day, maybe you have 5 hours free. So what I used to use that time for was, at the time, I thought just as leisure, I would just find every good fucking movie on IMDb or something. I'd just go by the top 250, then I'd go by director, then I'd go by actor. I'd find everything. I'd go, all right, I'm into Paul Newman. Every Paul Newman movie, watched it. Oh, Hitchcock seems pretty good. Let's just watch 70 Hitchcock movies. And I could basically go deep in the same way as I would in CS. If I'm interested in a player, or if it's StarCraft, I want to find someone's background. You watch most of their career. You want to know the storyline, how it fits together. So I would basically just do these deep dives on the people. Same with music. And when I would do this, obviously you find the ones where it's if you like this, what about this? Or someone recommends, oh, you've got to check this out. And listen, a lot of it is just people being a wanker, just trying to show off that they've watched a movie from 1940 that's a silent movie. So a lot of it won't hit. But then some of them, like these movies here, it's like the first time I would watch movies like this, because I was coming from a pure normie, a movie is a story that's fun to watch and has a good ending. I was watching these movies going, what even is this? Is he just shit at movies or something? And it actually felt obviously a lot of modern art is just shite like that. It's just some stupid, like, it's an idea of a concept. No, did you not know what I was referring to? Like, fuck off, mate. It's got to have some in. But in these, what I had to learn was a concept that I feel like is still so lost on the Western audience. It's called dream logic. The premise that basically it isn't about just makes sense or it's structured. It's like, no, what is the impression on you? What does it actually say to you? What does it mean? Like, for example, I mean, I actually thought a great movie that, again, exposed how people's brains have just been fucking calcified to the extent that they can only interpret literally. You know, when everyone was loving that Birdman movie.
Oh, yeah.
And then they were going at the end like, no, but did he kill him? It's like, that is dream logic incarnate, you fool. What are you talking about? It wasn't about what he physically did. None of the movie was about that. Spoiler, I'm not going to tell you what the movie's about. You interpret it yourself. But I personally took most of those scenes to probably be inside his mind. Because his mind's more interesting than a real life fucking guy in a midlife crisis going through, like, I don't know, his daughter fucking around him. So I thought that's not a very interesting movie, guys. You wouldn't want the movie to be structured that way. You want it to be that it's like it's all over the place because it's in the imaginal realm, isn't it? And also, this is the beauty of symbolism. Symbolism isn't supposed to be like this X. It's not an algebra equation. X equals Y over the sum root of no. The symbolism is like this. This could mean 1,000 things. So what does it trigger in you? What connections does it make in you? And if it comes anywhere close to something like the vision of the director, you might open up to a vista you'd never even imagined was possible. So to me, that's Jodorowsky's films entirely. Like, I actually think his comics are way better. Like, in his comics, because he's an older man as well, he's mastered sort of his storytelling. His movies, listen, there's a lot of like janky stuff in there. You can see the parts where he doesn't have budget for stuff, etc. But he reminds me of Grant Morrison, the comic book writer. He throws so many ideas at you. They don't all have to hit, mate. And in fact, the ones that don't, you just keep pushing through because you know another one's coming. Like, for example, El Topo is a way better movie beginning to end in terms of like, it's quite consistent theme. A lot of the things that happen, they do have sort of a logic to it, and you could follow it slightly like a traditional story. The Holy Mountain, if you attempt to follow it like a traditional story, you're not going to enjoy it, mate.
No.
I even think that's the reason why people sadly are like, hi, I was on 7 tabs and LSD, which that's like, listen, mate, like, if that's what it takes to get you to the state, you can just like allow a symbol in your brain. I mean, I guess, like, you know, you're on some like CIA level shit at that point in time. But, you know, like to me, what's great about these movies is they play with ideas, you know, and even better, they don't give you the idea on a platter. They don't tell you what it means.
The point you made about dream logic, I think that's that kind of verbalized the underlying factor with all these films. Jodorowsky, Kubrick, and Lynch, they all have an amazing factor of dream logic. Even Kubrick's Cold 2001. I mean, everything in space, the whole like last 30 minutes stuff, that's all just pure dream logic and whatnot. You know, his stuff in the, Full Metal Jacket. There's sequences in his films that just transport out of reality. And people are like, oh, he shot a Full Metal Jacket in England and whatnot. He didn't actually go on set. It's like, that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. The whole point was, he wasn't trying to make that point. And then the whole, specifically with 2001, there's the whole angle with the monolith and, media symbolism, psyops, all that stuff. And then, Lynch is the guy that I've gone through the least because I've gone through all of Kubrick's, gone through all of Jodorowsky's. Lynch's I've only done a once over, but I think he has the best grasp of individual psychology from in terms of the films. Of course, I haven't read the comics and whatnot, so maybe Jodorowsky just knocks it out of the park there. But individual psychology, internal, personal, intimate relationships with Lynch, it's unbelievable stuff. How he just, the surrealism that he uses in those films conveys more truth than, some bullshit Hollywood movie that wins just like a straight drama that wins the Oscar or whatever. He's able to do stuff because he's pushing the boundaries.
That's also, to me, why the whole like Joseph Campbell angle of like, obviously what they're talking about isn't real, but it's true. And if that's like confusing, it's the idea that there's some like essential essence to it that, it's obviously not real. It's a fucking movie. It's all staged and conceited, but you're doing something in it that resonates with you. Like, oh, that is actually, basically it's like Proust. Like the idea is you're just hitting on something that like no one ever expressed before. And the way he expressed suddenly creates a direct connection between you and your experience of that. And you're like, what the fuck? How did he externalize what I thought internally? Like the whole thing you were saying there about the Stargate sequence in 2001. man, the people who say like, oh, I'm a huge fan of Kubrick, and then they dissect all that literally and they try to construct a plot. It's like, dude, what are you watching? Like, I don't think these movies are for you. I'm sorry. Like, they're really not. Like, it wasn't about like colors, and there wasn't supposed to be an actual logic of what that meant. Like, to me, what you're doing there, it's like this great quote someone once said about jokes, where they said jokes are like live frogs. If you dissect them, they die.
Yeah.
Because you don't, because you can cut it up and go, the leg can, there's nothing left at that point, mate. The essence of what made it a frog, you couldn't cut it open, could you? Yeah, there's something extra than just the mechanical elements of it. So to me, a sequence like that, again, in some ways, especially if it's communicating symbolically, you won't be able to verbalize what it means. Because the whole verbal, rational, like conscious part of your brain isn't what was communicating with it. This is why, in my opinion, it is stuff that has like mythological, archetypal elements that hits you the deepest. Because it isn't about like running a little subroutine in your computer of your conscious brain. It's like about putting a symbol down into the fucking murky depths of your unconscious. And if there it connects with some foul fucking Lovecraftian beast, some crazy shit could happen in your life.
Yeah, it just they transcend logic and they don't care. They don't care. They're not going to make a rational, logical film because they know that they can express more in the medium if they don't follow those hard set rules.
Rationality is mad overrated. I actually, of course, I went through a phase where I loved, Christopher Hitchens, and I thought, it's all about like, oh, no, I have like a fortress in my mind of like rationality, and it's almost like Sam Harris basically, because I had a bit of the psychedelic influence. I was
with his debate with Peterson, his famous one where they got stuck on truth for an hour or whatever, and it's like Harris, like, come on, man, like. He didn't understand the concept that you just talked about. What is it could be true, but it can't be, maybe it's not real, but it's definitely true.
Yes. No, to me, because what you're missing if you do that is you already have a prior like assumption, which I don't actually know where you've gotten this from. It's where you just go, there is such a thing as the right answer and I can reach it. It's like, holy shit, what a mad leap. Dude, that's worse than any religious fucking like faith. What are you talking about? Because here's the problem. Your whole mythology and your whole like teleology isn't based around the idea that someone came along like a programmer and said, here's some rules. I'm going to build the universe this way. And then within it, you can learn the rules and operate. That's your entire premises. It can't be that. So what's mad is it's like C.S. Lewis made a great point about this, where basically like the notion of rationality collapses in on itself if you're an atheist. Because in that scenario, like you believe it's all randomness and that like, eventually a rock just started talking essentially with like 50 million steps in between. Well, how could the rock ever know that anything it ever thought was actually real or tangible or true? There's no basis. There's nothing holding up the house of cards. There's no table there. Like at least the person who has some level of like something must have been, because they always just go to that angle of like, well, you have to understand nature is mathematics. No, it's like, first of all, it isn't cocksucker because you guys love putting in constants that do not exist in nature to make a fucking equation that doesn't work. That's called cheating, mate. That's like if the NBA refs go, listen, this team isn't going to win this game, but you know what? We'd really like them in the final. Give them 15 free throws. Like that's not, you can't then go, the better team won in the end, didn't they? No, they didn't. They did because you gave them 15 free throws. Right. That's what fucking all of science is like, as far as I can tell. And I get why it is, by the way, because if you ever go and look where all these ideas actually come from, they literally all come from the imaginal realm and people working in the fucking occult. So the idea is, how are you going to translate that to the physical realm? You're going to have to fudge the fucking numbers somewhere. You have to pretend you came up with it for a different reason because no one's going to be in on that factor. So to me, like that concept of like rationalism, materialism, it's like, it's a cool room to hang out with in certain settings. Yeah. But like the idea your entire life gets forced through that prism, it's that you're just going to have it's going to be a pretty sort of impoverished life, I think. You won't be able to go down these avenues. You won't be able to let yourself just go with certain concepts. Like, it's one of the things actually in Alan Moore's comics, probably his most underrated comic is the comic Promethea. Now, the best reason, by the way, even if you don't fuck with the story to read this, is it has one of the best artists in comics ever, a guy called J.H. Williams III. And essentially, this guy is unbelievable because he can master almost every comic style. So what he does in Promethea is issue to issue, he's just doing completely different art styles. He's not doing his art style to the best, like all comic artists do. He's just going, let's do 60s pop art this time. Right now, we're going to go over into like a fucking like landscape painting of pastels type one. Now we'll go to this one. So this guy's already a genius. Just visually, you can really enjoy these comics. But the story behind it, right, is basically Alan Moore trying to explain like Hermetic philosophy and magic to people. And in doing so, he's going to lose a lot of people because a lot of it is like, you have to know, like he's going through basically like very structured, like Masonic approach to how these things work, if there's layers and levels and this represents the. So listen, a lot of it you might get lost on, but one part that's amazing is it's a way that he's able to convey his idea of where ideas come from. He genuinely thinks that ideas, and I fuck with this heavy, they come from a realm called the imaginal realm. And listen, if you want to connect this, you can connect the idea that, it's the human unconscious, or, it's like all of us can connect to the same place and forage in the same area.
Is that kind of like a morphic field sort of thing?
A little bit like that, but he's trying to make it more like science. And I'd say it's more like the fucking noosphere, or whatever people say, or the Akashic record. It's something in that sort of realm. The idea is, though, it's like, I've always thought this, right? Probably one of the biggest, like, overlooked aspects of all of life. It's so pathetic, is that people let guys in lab coats tell them, all your dreams in your mind. Yeah, that's just your brain defragging your hard drive. Oh, when you have an idea that didn't exist before and wasn't based on anything and it just came to you, that was just a misfire in your brain. Psychedelics, they're not psychedelics. Yeah, they're not psychedelics. They're called hallucinogens, mate. That was just random colors flickering in your eyes that made you actually have a real experience where you went back in time, saw yourself as a child, experienced your mother speaking to you through her telepathic thoughts, and it healed a fucking wound inside. That was just random misfire into your brain. Like, basically what they do is they take, by definition, the most incredible possible psychic experiences you can have and go just sort of fucking, it was just a shadow on the trees that looked like a dragon, mate. It wasn't real. But instead, if you explore that area, it's the most vivid area of your life possible. It's why when people have deep psychedelic journeys, they always say this line: it was more real than my own life is right now. Because basically, think about it, right? It's the reason I love to do the flotation tank. All the time, we think we're seeing through our eyes and thinking in our brain. Almost everything cool happens in whatever the third eye, the imagination is. And that is a realm that we're just told, don't worry, nothing to worry about, nothing going on there. Everything's going on there. Everything is going on there for sure.
Yeah, look up in the sky instead. Try to find the UFOs. Don't look inside. And it's funny too, because all the whole thing of science and whatnot comes from John Dee. It comes from all the occult stuff right now. It's all the direct lineage, but we're so shut off. We think World War II is the beginning of history, and we're just so shut off, and we just think like, oh, science is just numbers and calculations and flotation, and there's nothing, all that religion and stuff. That's just silly and stupid and not rational in our day and age.
Dude, here's what's wild. When they tell you, oh, these primitive people, they have stories, myths that the gods taught them how to write and to do that. Cocksucker, your entire thing is based on that exact premise that angels are telling motherfuckers in the medieval period. This is how fucking mathematics is going to work. Like, are you kidding me? The real joke of society is this. Everyone sees the surface area and they go, right, I'll just interpret it that way. I'll never look into it. And the one thing they never do, this if you ever look into conspiracy stuff, but apply it to everything in life. What you do in conspiracy is you start with the most base level, follow the money. Who funded this? Who funded him? Who owns that company? Who are the top? If you do that, by the way, at the end, you find out, it doesn't matter what you're telling me you do at the end here. If you're the fucking Rockefellers or something, I imagine you're probably not doing something awesome at the end there that you pretended with a different guy was the front man. Similarly, for all ideas, you've got to keep going backwards. Like, one of the reasons I was super early in esports, before they actually came as the barbarians at the gates to tell people, by the way, SJWs are going to fuck our shit up so hard. And they were like, what do you mean? And then I was like, just wait till they come. And then when they came, right, dude, people to this date in esports are doing those whack, like, fucking conservative arguments of like, they're just hypocrites and liars and stuff. It's like, you are aware, if you literally go to the books they say influenced them and the teachers that taught them those things and look at who the philosophers were behind those ideas, they have certain assumptions. 1, there is no such thing as an objective fact. 2, everything is relative. 3, everything is a power game. Therefore, if everything is a power game, all you are doing is attempting to acquire as much power for yourself as possible and deny as much power to your enemy. If I only want power over you, I'm not having a debate where if you tell me something wrong, I go, you win, because then I give you the power. Like, essentially, it's not a dynamic where we're having a discussion. Those people, by the way, in left-wing circles, don't even believe you can engage with ideas. They believe there are good and bad concepts. And if you are bad, you cannot possibly reach sort of good nature or whatever.
This is the first time this clicked. That when you talk about power right there, I've heard that a lot from Jordan Peterson and whatnot. That reminds me of that Robert Anton Wilson book, the Prometheus Rising, when it was like either the second or the third level is like, I'm in charge and then I'm submissive. Like that, it's just that very low level tribal power game. It's like that's what they want to revert you to.
Yes. And also, as you're pointing out there's another classic thing. Everything to people, it's not their fault entirely. They were absolutely programmed from birth from every spectrum of reality to be like this and to think there's nothing more to their life and to themselves. Sure. But unfortunately, people just find one thing. And like a little kid at school, like A is for apple. They think that A can't be for anything else in the entire world. It's only apple. So what's mad is when they interpret something like that, right? If there's anything to it, if there's any juice, like, listen, as soon as you interpret like social dynamics as power dynamics, that's very interesting. By the way, you can't watch an episode of Game of Thrones and enjoy it without understanding that basic level of the show. But that isn't the only part of the show. In the same ways, the part that's about the gods and the mythological part, that's not the only part of the show. In the same ways, the tits and ass and the most basic mundane part isn't the only part of the show. These are all different layers you can read them at. And I'm not even trying to claim that, one's higher, one's lower, one's more. They're all legitimate. They all have their own resonance. So that's why Joseph Campbell is doing a mythic level reading or something. Someone else might be doing like, I don't know, other ones might be like a mystical level of reading. So it's just you actually directly experience it. You're not even just learning through the abstraction of a myth. If you've got to also be able to afford the idea that things can mean multiple different things in that sense, because I agree. They just go to the power level and go, look, there's something to this. Therefore, that's all the whole world is. And I'm only going to force the whole world through that little prism. And if you do that, obviously you cut off all the other possibilities of what it could be,
Right. And the world ends up becoming a pretty terrible place if you're just looking at it through power.
It's like the people who think that, the world's just about making money. If you yourself have that as an opinion, then everyone else is just doing it for money. What other reason could there be, right?
The Nickel and I homes of the world as such. You introduced me actually to Robert Anton Wilson, and a lot of these concepts are brought up in that Prometheus Rising book and whatnot. And to me, when I got to the, kind of the end stages of that book, the last like 3 or 4 of them. I think he even said in this book, it's almost impossible to describe these levels in terms of language and whatnot. And, I think these levels are what, great art, is able to come in contact with, even if it's super briefly, these like ultra high level experiences and feelings. And that's why, again, back to the Sam Harris approach. That's why pure rationality just won't work. Cause you're just kneecapping yourself from looking at things from different contexts and different angles, and which could have a great nugget of information, a great nugget of truth. You're just cutting off your connection to all those other things.
Yeah, because basically you've made rationality your god. So essentially rationality, it's the razor, isn't it? It's always the blade, the sword, the razor. Well, if you have that, all you're doing is cutting things up. So you can chop them up and see what they're made up of. That's one way of interpreting the world. But as we're talking about here, some things are a totality. Some things only exist holistically. Some things cannot be accessed and then communicated through little fucking mouse noises that vibrate through the air. Sometimes there's a bit more to it. It's half the reason why I think most of the spiritual stuff just gets lost on people, because they're just like, well, I read the book. It's about the experience you have to get to the end of the fucking book. That's why to me the ultimate example is the Zen koan. It's not about knowing the answer. It's not like a fucking like a pop quiz. What is the answer to this equation? Well, it's this. It can only be this. No, the question is, how does your mind go through the process of an experience that would even lead you to have an answer anywhere in that guy's realm and direction? That's why the Zen master never tells you, correct, this is the answer. He just goes, maybe. And you have to keep searching yourself, or you have to move on to something else,
Yeah, getting that true knowing inside instead of having, just relying on somebody else telling you it's right and whatnot. That's a very powerful concept. That's extremely powerful. Yeah.
That's basically mysticism, because it's the idea that you can actually directly interface with this thing. You don't need a mediator. You don't need someone to tell you this is what it actually means in this sense. Like to me, when you do stuff like that, you're also never going to enjoy it. I've seen so many people, I'm not a huge fan of James Joyce. I find it very hard to read. I do think some of it, it's definitely brilliant and has some aspects like if you're ever high and just read Finnegan's Wake out loud, some great shit in there. There's some moments that are pretty transformative, but most people don't do that. They go, right, this is impenetrable. So what I have to do is I have to find the smartest guy to explain it to a dumbass like me. And that's like going, right, oh, look at the whole jungle area. I'm just going to have to pay a tourist guide to walk me around the edges of it and go, and if you went in there, this is what would happen. And you go, I went to the jungle. You didn't go fucking anywhere, mate. You think you went to the jungle. If you'd actually been in there, listen, you might even die. That's how fucking insane that experience could be. But tell you what, if you could make it out and you could survive all that, you'd be a totally different human being at the end of it.
Yeah. And that's something that I've tried to adopt more, is before I, because what I used to do is some movie would come out or whatever, and I would try to go, or some game would come out, and I would go read all the reviews right away and determine if I'm going to buy it that way. Instead of just going, that game looks interesting, that movie looks interesting, go watch it, and then go, let's see what other people think about that, and then kind of add to my understanding that way, instead of having it pre-formed going into it with all the notions and whatnot. Because a lot of people, they rush for the reviews before, and it's like the second you do that, you can never go back. Like it's like you give yourself you're rushing to your psychic prison, and then boom, your just perceptions are forever molded by these journalists that obviously don't have your best interest in mind and whatnot.
No, of course not. Yeah.
So, in terms of the, I was actually watching I was at a shoot, a week ago, and somebody brought up Watchmen, and then I went and watched your Thorin side video on Watchmen and whatnot, and that drove me down the whole thing with Alan Moore and all that stuff like that. Why do you think Alan Moore? And I'm going to phrase this dumb just to tee you off. Why do you think Alan Moore is so great in his approach to comics and media in general?
I mean, first of all,
one principle.
Like on the most basic possible level, like one thing I will say is he understands like that when you start out doing something, you are in the process of it. You have to learn the basic rules of the medium. Then you can flaunt them and you can break all the conventions. So basically, he did just learn from the other great comics writers and things they were doing. And then beyond that, he basically was just willing to say, why does this have to be this way? Why can't I express something differently? And I think he actually kind of summed it up best. One of the reasons why he doesn't enjoy having movie adaptations made of his work is because he didn't write them in a way that would work in a movie. Like he wrote it in a way that only works on a comic book page. Like, for example, you can do a double splash page. If you read Promethea, he does panels and pages where the story goes around in a circle like this and goes inwards like a snake. You can't do that on a movie screen. Like that concept doesn't even exist. Right. So listen, if you were a really genius filmmaker, you could take that and do something totally different with it on the screen. I like that kind of adaptation, but it's kind of worthless to attempt to recreate that on a movie when he did it explicit for what a page can do and how you interact with images and words at the same time. So to me, it's the idea that he just was able to see what the medium wasn't and then explore those areas. I think that's what you do in pretty much every form of art. Like you don't just look at what was done before and go, I hope I could do a really good version of that. It's like you're also, like I say, you're not explicitly going, I'll never do what they did. That can't work. It's more like you're always looking for what hasn't been done. So if you ever read any of Alan Moore's comics, it's like almost everything he did that was brilliant, let's say, prior to 10 years ago, it won't even actually seem as genius now because you don't know, like Jodorowsky, how many people just copied his shit and just made it part of the mainstream culture. Like what's mad about Alan Moore is the comics industry themselves, because he's basically told them to go fuck themselves 50 times over. They all have this coping mechanism where they have to pretend that he was really good 20 odd years ago, but like it's just him. He's the one. It's like when fans just constantly go on and on about me, and then if I tweet, they go, look, he's bloody obsessed with us, when it's obviously the other way around. They gaslight the fuck out of you. Basically, the comics industry gaslights the fuck out of Alan Moore, because when Alan Moore will make a comment like, it almost feels like they're just going through my old rubbish bins looking for ideas. They'll go, that's pathetic. He hasn't even written for DC Comics in 30 odd years. And then they'll come out, no joke, you can go look this up, with a Green Lantern series, a crossover event, which is literally we're talking the 2010s, and it'll all be based on a one-off story he wrote for Green Lantern in like 1984 or something. It's true. They literally, because he's having these ideas and he's trying to interface with something, by the way, way beyond just like a comic book idea. Like he's asking what are ideas themselves. Everyone else who doesn't have that level or who doesn't even know you can access that just goes like, basically like, they're like the fucking reindeer that comes and drinks the like fucking like North European shaman's piss after he's eaten the fucking fly agaric mushroom, because you can still get some of the like mushroom come through the urine. It's not all processed initially once through the human body. They come and start drinking. That's what the other comic book writers are like. They're like, oh, is there anything I can get out of this? And they're all just little fucking parasites on them. And it's mental. I've never seen one intellect literally, not just like dominating industries, not trying to dominate it, just exist and like almost like magnetically draw everyone to him from all angles, even if he's not trying. So to me, he's tapped into something. He's almost like he is accessing some sort of imaginal realm. And other people, they've got good skills at writing. They have a few ideas of their own, but mate, they can't fucking stay away from these guys' ideas. It's the same with me in esports. Listen, I have a Twitter account. I tweet a lot. The amount of people where their Twitter accounts are them discussing what I'm doing on my Twitter, it's like, Jesus fucking Christ, man, how could you live like that? Like, really, like, listen, methinks the lady doth protest too much. Like, why am I a topic conversation? I'm the fucking journalist. I'm supposed to be like the byline and you read the content. You're obsessed with the person doing the story. So I think it's just how you interpret things.
he seems extremely overpowered for his role as just a comic artist.
It's ridiculous.
And that's something I've always thought about you. Like you're what I was attracted to, like your analysis, your content, and whatnot. You clearly have a deeper insight than a lot of esports people. They're just like the game. That is all,
Sure.
or the game in sports. Maybe they have one other interest that they'll kind of loop in, but you're bringing a whole bunch of different interests, deep knowledge, blah blah blah, bunch of that stuff. Do you feel overpowered for your role as like esports journalist?
In the sense that if you think of it like some sort of fucking industrialist nightmare of like, I'm a cog in the machine, sir, and I'm a file clerk, and I'll have those papers done by Monday. Like, you're not even a human if you do that, mate. You're just a fucking workaround. Like, in my opinion, this is what ideally everyone would be doing, right? You're an individual. You are something that can access. You are obviously way beyond just whatever your job title is. So what someone like Alan Moore does, and what I'm trying to do is, say I'm in the field of comics, right? And then separately, I'm reading a book about, might be like fucking Marcus Aurelius, or I'm reading reading a comic book. If a brilliant idea comes from there, my brain, because I've done so much work in esports, might go, that's a bit like this in esports. And I'll bring it back into esports. And suddenly I can do something in esports. And because no one else brought that idea in, now I'm doing something interesting with it. So even though it sounds like basically, aren't you overqualified? Like, why don't you just go and do that thing? It's like, because again, why would I learn the programming language of how to write a comic when I'm fucking straight fire at doing one-off rants on videos? Why don't I take the idea from the comic into that video and make the video way better and actually introduce people to ideas they've never even thought of through the medium of talking about who's the best fucking sniper in a video game for children? Like, there's another thing Alan Moore figured out years ago. Comic books, when he grew up, were for little kids, and they were basically failed writers that couldn't get a job writing fiction. So they just put their ideas in comics. What he realized was, if you're a genius, that medium actually arguably can do more than even movies can. It can do stuff that no one's even thought of. So why not actually just see what's possible in there? Because that's where you've built your skill set up. It would basically be like saying, and pick an instrument, like something, I don't know, the saxophone. So the saxophone probably traditionally associated with jazz, right? It's mainly in that particular field. What if you took the saxophone and made the most insane prog rock music of all time? Bet not many people have tried that, right? That might be an entire new, like, blended genre no one's ever done before. Instead, what someone else would do is just go, oh, you like prog? Put that saxophone down, pick up this fucking guitar. You better learn an 8-minute solo. Like, what would the point be? He's a master of the fucking saxophone. Keep adding to that. Use your skill set. He's already got momentum with that particular art form.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's compartmentalization, and I think that affects a huge part of society as a whole. We pigeonhole ourselves into roles, and we don't allow. You've heard that quote, specialization is for insects or whatever, and generalization, we don't allow ourselves, we square off our brains, and it makes it harder for us to incorporate true knowledge across all the domains and whatnot, and then truly enrich every domain with, cross-pollination and whatnot.
Sure.
I mean, you've probably, you've probably, a lot of your colleagues, or, people that you've interacted with online and whatnot, they probably only talk about the game, and when you talk to them at the after party or whatever, it's just the game and small talk in their brain.
Yeah, the game is life to them. Yeah, whereas to me, life involves the game. And that's the big clear distinction between the two. No, I'll give you a mad example here, because this is going to be one where there's so much social gatekeeping that if this makes people tap out, get the fuck out. We don't need you, mate. We're not trying to attract followers here. It's for people who can vibe with it. Kanye West, no joke, is a master of this. I remember watching, because back in the day, right, I never listened to Kanye West's music. Like, I wasn't a big fan of his first albums, mate, which are just like hip hop with like a little bit of a weird poppy vibe to him. And he's got sort of like, this like weird character. I only initially found out about him because of all the ridiculous media stunts. George Bush doesn't care about black. Like, holy fuck, who's this guy? Like, this is insane. And then obviously the classic one was when he did that Zane Lowe interview in, I think, 2010, where it's this British journalist, he's technically from like South Africa or something, but basically he does this interview with this guy. It's the one where he goes mad ego, and he's going like, we're basically rap stars, and then you rock and roll, and I'm the biggest rap star of them all, doing all this shit, right? So initially I was watching it just for the spectacle, like, this is fucking mental. He's just going off, and this is mad. But what I realized was the stuff he was saying once you got past the persona was like some mad, like sort of insightful and shrewd sort of takes on life. Yeah. Like, he was pointing out when he kept talking about the thing of like, I was in Paris, and then like this specific person, it's like, Kanye, I don't follow high fashion. I don't know the fuck you're talking about here, mate. Like, this, Da Vinci or whatever, like, they wouldn't help me get a factory, and then then they were trying to keep me out of the fabric business. I'm going, what are you talking about, bro? And what I learned later was basically because he'd gotten really good at making beats that allowed him to then rap on the albums. He's not even that good a rapper, but then he sort of leveled his own style up, got good at rapping and producing, became a star himself, not just producing the beats, right? He's already, by the way, there, transcended nearly all the people who are the producers. Then he's become his own superstar, making all his own shit. So then he thought, right, I have some ideas about fashion. Like, I'd like to make some trainers and I'd like to make some clothes. And basically, loads of people in the world who would have loved to have had dinner with Kanye West or would love him at their fashion show, they were like, look, you make rap music, we make fashion. And they all thought, and they were proud of the idea, it was compartmentalization. And his whole shit was like, look, I just want a chance. Let me into the fashion world. Like, I've got some ideas of what I can do. By the way, everyone who laughed at that interview and all the rest of it, I think he's only made billions of dollars making just fucking clothes after that. And he's definitely made way more from fucking clothes than he ever made off his music. So he not only proved they were wrong there, but he's another guy where everything that happens in this guy's life, he just brings it back into the music and does something new with his music. Like a little detail a lot of people aren't going to know. But if you know how to find things online, a lot of it's even on YouTube. This is mad fire if you know Kanye West. If you only know Kanye West's released albums, right, you might know in interviews, he sounds like he's something of a charlatan. Like he just tells you he's working on 50 projects, or he says, I'm working on this, but then like next year, it never comes out. And you just think, he was probably just bullshitting there. It's probably just a fly-by-night idea. I'm not joking. Every album he said in interviews he was working on that never came out, dude, he did like 60% of the album. They've all been leaked online. You can go look on YouTube now. You can go find the mixtapes. Now, I say 60%. Sometimes the beat's like fire, and then he literally doesn't have the verse. He goes, no. Like he's sort of filling in for what would have been the verse there, right? So the guy is literally as prolific as he suggests. Like when he brags about being an artist, I'm not joking. He might have made like 15 albums. You just don't know because they weren't all officially released. And he is such a ridiculous character. He really is just making 60% of an album and going, you know what? That was yesterday's idea. I'm on to some new shit now, and he's off to do that. So like I don't think people realize like art's almost like a vibe. It's almost like a mentality. It's not necessarily like the end product. It's not just the pure aesthetic at the end and, you know, the technical ability.
No, it's a lifestyle.
That allows you to express it, hopefully.
Yeah, it's a lifestyle. It's a full lifestyle. And, you know, speaking of compartmentalization and whatnot, you know, obviously you're not going to be in esports forever. CSGO scene's a bit wonky right now. You know, and there's a lot of talent also in the Counter-Strike scene and whatnot, and League of Legends and whatnot that are eventually going to want to either branch out of esports, go to a different game, you know, maybe do some more traditional media stuff and whatnot. And one area that I think is growing is the MMA world, and how there's a lot. We have so many skilled casters in CSGO and League of Legends that I think would transition to MMA like unbelievably well.
Sure.
Like, for example, I was thinking about like Sadokist. He's been out for a while. It's been a year or so. I don't think he can't cast it during 2020. And I was just thinking like the UFC desk is good. You know, Joe Rogan's a bit wonky here and there. John Anik's pretty good. Paul Felder, you know, they're all good, but they don't have that like great play-by-play, that great like you know, amazing cast. And I was just thinking, you put Sadokist in there. He learns MMA for 1 year. I mean, he would be the best. Immediately.
He's already better now in his game than they are in their field. I agree. Like that's actually a sport where it's like quite underdeveloped. Sadly, because the essence of the sport is people punching each other in the brain till they get brain damage. Like, yeah, you know what's not going to lead to the most fucking verbose, you know, vernaculars possible, is it? Like, it's not going to be awesome. But no, I totally agree. Like, I think there's so many things people could branch out and do. Basically, you've already seen it with some of the things like, you know, the Ringer, fucking Barstool Sports. It's more about like these personalities build themselves up and then you follow their work. It's not like you don't come for the end product, you come for the person producing it, as it were. Because there's another thing, like even though we use that terminology, content creator, consumer, and that's just stuck in like a capitalist nightmare, mate. It's not really. It's more like, you know, I'm someone, and listen, like if you're really good at making content, it's like fucking farting. It just happens eventually, and then people vibe with it. Yeah,
you know, and the like a lot of people are super mad. I've been super mad in the purest MMA and boxing about, you know, Logan Paul and Jake Paul coming over and boxing and whatnot. And what to me that signals is, look what you can do with a brand, with your own personal sort of brand, your own fan base and whatnot. Like Logan and Jake, they are teaching all these people in this industry that's so tied down to tradition and like, oh, you have to wait for the title shot if all the guys can come together and agree on a deal, and you know, if you can get horsehair in the gloves and whatnot. No, these guys are coming in with huge brands making fights. You know, like Logan and Jake Paul box more than Tyson Fury has. You know, in the past year, like the heavyweight champion. You know, to me, that's crazy that random guys can just come in and be way more prolific than staple stars in the sport. And I mean, with esports and whatnot, you see a lot of pro players that in the server they're amazing, but to get them out of the server, and you just go on Twitter and they're like, "GG, good game, good for you. Oh, buy the Betway sponsorship package. Oh, you can bet on my." There's nothing there, and it's like they could be making so much more money. They could really transcend their esports position if they just put some effort into building their brand.
I mean, the sad part about this is like everything that's a tool or every principle can be perverted to like a negative or like a dystopian end. Right. The real problem is all the things you ever do when you watch a screen is just entertainment. And that literally just means to like hold your mind. That's it. All you're doing is making a person sit still and not stop watching that thing on the screen. Hence, television is just about watch what's coming up next. You know what? In the modern day, I don't like to do that. I'd rather, all right, how about all the episodes of the show are available? Oh, all right, then. Now, all of a sudden, I'm watching 10 episodes. Like, it's all just about that. So, unfortunately, people haven't realized that factor. Because if you do, what you realize very quickly is people don't watch sport because of how good the people are at sport. They like that guy because he has a similar mindset to me, or he comes from whatever your reasoning is. Or my dad used to like someone like they have a personal human reason that connects them to the entertainment factor of that aspect. And then probably the reason he got through the filter to be noticed was he's really good at his job. But instead, all everyone does is every basketball player thinks I'm being watched because of how good I am at this fadeaway shot. It's like, mate, the most boring cut of all time of the fadeaway. You don't know them. There's some brilliant players in the 80s you've never heard of. They just didn't have a good personality. Meanwhile, we all know there's some shitter like the people you're referencing who are all style, no substance, but they've maxed the style out so much. Even if you explicitly don't like the substance, you can't avoid talking about them. You have to get drawn into it. The number one thing that will make people watch is some level of entertainment. And by the way, entertainment doesn't mean you're having a good time. You can hate this motherfucker. That'll inspire you like hell. That's what politics is. Politics isn't, this is my candidate. It's like, I'll let this guy have a break so I can use the position of pretending like him to hate this motherfucker. I hate him so much for everything. It's all like psychic fucking offloading and scapegoating, isn't it? Like to make your shit life make sense, I have to blame this guy in a suit because he's got a slightly different color behind him. Like that's humans are mad petty on that level. And so basically, unfortunately, I do think all entertainment does sort of come in. It's like that saying that like love comes in at the eyes. It all just comes on the most base aesthetic level and basic concepts of like tribalism and I like this and I don't like that. But the problem with it is that is when you're just keeping yourself on, I'd say, like a very low frequency. That's why it can hit the total lowest common denominator. What you want to do is use that as an entry point. And then you slip in under there some real shit. You have something behind it that's legit as fuck. I'll give you an example. Everyone in MMA, before we had these like real jokers came in, used to go, that Chael Sonnen's just a talker. Mate, he's one of the best fucking like wrestlers probably to ever fight in MMA. He had a problem, by the way, that he had some sort of like scenario where he's anti-clutch and would just get fucking choked out in every fight. But up until that point, he once had that witty comment he made. I think it was before the second silver fight. Something like, I've never lost a round in my career. Dude, it was true. Go watch. He gets submitted. He's winning all of the rounds in his entire career. On the feet, he's like tactically outboxing people. He's not damaging them because he had fucking pillows for hands, didn't he? On the ground, he's getting all the takedowns that win you fights on MMA scoring. And then he is actually controlling people on the ground. And that, by the way, I know people go, pillow hands, he's not even hurting them. Listen, do you know what it's like to get held down by a man? Use all your energy trying to get up and have him punch you in the face 400 times. And even if they're little taps, 400's going to get to you, mate. It's going to hurt in the end. So people don't know how good that guy was because they only saw the persona,
Chael, I mean, it's one of those things where you look at the record and you're like, he was good, but he wasn't that. And then, like you said, you look at the context for his fights. You actually,
you fought a lot of top people.
Yeah, and you look. I mean, the thing is, even going like, I think MMA records are fucked because people
terrible.
They look at the numbers and they're like, this guy's shit. And then you look at who they thought if you can go a round and if you can win a round off some of these guys, right? You're amazing. Like Vanderlei Silva, for example, right? Oh, he's got 12 losses. Or whatever. You look at who he's fought. You look at who he's won. You look at who he's bloodied up, right? That's insane. Like that should be more than enough for. But people just, I mean, they probably do this with CS:GO too. Look at the losses. Look at the the stats and go, oh, he's awful. He's not as good as this guy who has a squeaky clean record or whatever. He's not as interesting as this guy.
I have a whole thing in esports that makes me like very unique as an analyst, which is I believe stats are the beginning. That stats are a question, they're never the answer. Sure. Everyone else is the opposite, mate. Stats answer the question. Stats decide the debate. Stats tell you who was better. They don't.
TV brain.
Yeah, one number's bigger than the other. That's it. Like if you're telling me, well, this guy's better because his said 10 and the other one said 8, you weren't even involved in that, dickhead. Just like the magnitude of numbers is what decided that. When did your human brain and experience of watching this person ever interact in that equation? It didn't. So, like in my opinion, when you have all the stats and all that shit, it's not about that. It's about the qualitative test of watching them fight, etc. Like everyone knows there's fighters that have lost 1 million fights who are fucking incredible. And there's guys who've won 1 million fights on technicalities of how MMA rules are done that are garbage. There's people who've won like 10 fights in a row all by decision, but not even like they weren't even controlling someone. They did 2 takedowns that the guy got straight back up for. Like, it's just garbage, man. I also think MMA is the worst example ever of how most people, again, I don't know how much this is chicken and egg. I don't know how much they were programmed from birth to have to like revere authority, or whether it is like, because when everyone goes, it's just human nature. That's like a brilliant way that scientists have to hide all the evil shit that they've done to you in your life. Like humans just need to be controlled. On some level, like one of the things that's mad to me is we can all watch boxing and MMA and we all go, bloody rigged, didn't it? Like the way the Vegas refs do things, they don't know anything about the sport. Oh, but they said that the guy who I think actually won lost the fight. Oh, well, he's got an L on his record. Yeah, he's 10-4 now. What are you talking about? Why do you have to accept that? You're not Wikipedia. Yeah. You can just think whatever you want. Like, I don't give a fuck. Everyone go watch this fight right now. When Carlos Condit fought Johnny Hendricks, I think he won that fight. Because even though he got taken down loads, so he lost the fight on paper, he instantly is doing damage off the ground with elbows, kicking the guy in the face, getting up constantly against the wrestler who, by the way, was probably more juiced than fucking Sonny D. He's coming up off this, and it's the opposite. Like, if I get points for controlling you by taking you down, why don't I get points for picking you up off the fucking ground and doing damage back? Like, people, that's my point in that scenario. I don't care that it says on his record he lost that fight. He won that fight as far as I'm concerned.
2 guys. What you said right there, Condit and Nate Diaz. You look at, their records, right? And you think, oh, they've lost a bunch. Go watch their fights. Go watch their fights. I mean, you even saw with the last Nate Diaz fight, the very last round, he was still 100% there. He was bloodied up for sure. He was 100% in that fight. He almost won the fight. He just did some dumb stuff and didn't capitalize on his
they don't try and point fight, do they? So unfortunately for them, they don't realize they're in the wrong sport, mate. Like, this isn't like Bushido. It's not about fucking samurai code and like, oh, you lost because you stabbed me in the back. It's like, mate, in MMA, you win the fight doing that, don't you? Like, what are you talking about? So listen, I revere it. It's like the same thing. I have the same take in sports. Like, every single title that a player in the NBA wins, where they had just enough help and then they win the championship by how brilliant they are, that might as well be 4 titles compared to like Kevin Durant and the Golden State Warriors. Those rings aren't equal, mate. Everyone doesn't get a ring like that. A ring isn't a ring, isn't a ring, isn't a ring. And also, who did he play against? Did he beat a great team? Did he beat them in an off season? Did all the wrong moves happen before? Like, this is why you can't let the fucking thing on the piece of paper tell you what your brain experienced, because it's just the worst simulacrum of what you did ever. You've literally resolved it all down to a number. What even is that? Dude, the worst ever is I'm a big fan of tennis. Tennis is probably one of the ultimate style sports of all time. Incredible substance to all the champions. Super consistent, so you have a massive sample size. Now it's just about who had the total number of trophies at the end of their career. Give me a break. What is this?
Yeah. So surface level. It's unbelievable. I mean, and then there's context even within that. Like, I know almost fuck all about tennis, but I know there's clay court. There's, there's... Okay, so even at that level, okay, there's probably some conversation that we need to have right there. And then there's like probably the tournaments you're at, right? Probably some guys peak at different tournaments, or they consistently go to,
Shall I give you a mad angle? Here's an example of lateral thinking that you can use around stats to tell you that a stat doesn't tell you what you think. Let's say a guy, so basically this was actually the case with Roger Federer and Rafael Nadal when they were number 1 and number 2 in the world for many, many years, is Rafael Nadal does have stylistic advantages in terms of raw skill set to Roger Federer. Essentially, one of his main strengths count as one of the only vague weaknesses in Roger Federer's arsenal. And basically, as a result, he always held the head-to-head record over him, right? So then people would use the logic that went like this, like, well, he's obviously better since when they play one-on-one, he always wins, right? Here's what they didn't understand is, as you said, the surface has a massive effect on who wins a match like that, because Rafael Nadal is basically the best clay court player ever. So if they play on clay, he will win the match, even though during the time he was at his young peak, Roger Federer was the second best clay court player. But his problem was he's running into the number one clay court player all the time. And because they're number one and number two, he meets him in the final and he loses the final to him. So that's going to make your head-to-head look shit because you're losing all the time. Are you ready for the kicker? When Roger Federer at the time was way better on grass and the open court of like Australian Open, the US Open, Nadal wasn't as good on those surfaces, so he couldn't meet him in the final, lose to him, and even the record up because he wasn't good enough to get there. Right. So by being worse, he got a better record, and it made morons think he is automatically better. Now, listen, you can have a great qualitative debate who's better and what means, but that's an example of where the stat isn't telling you what you think it is. Because basically, it's like, what about the dog that didn't bark, like the Sherlock Holmes story, right? There's something missing here. What's conspicuous by its absence? That's why I always quote that classic quote. It's one of the best for all time for stats. Stats are like a bikini. What they show is enticing, but what they reveal, what they hide is essential. Right.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing too. Like when, I mean, we can go back to CS:GO for this. Like there's so many players. Like there was that Nip Op or Draken, right? Where you'd look at his stats, you're like, oh yeah, this guy's doing pretty good. And you watch him in the server or whatever, and you're like,
high test was garbage.
Yeah. And then, Jame before in, what was it? Was it Gambit or?
No, he's in Virtus Pro. It was called the Vanguard before that. But
Vanguard. That's right. Right. When they were going up, you're like, oh, James, he's the next Simple, blah blah. And you watch him, and he's just saving every single round.
One of the worst eye tests of all time, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's just sad because stats are something that people think they can just hold on to it and like that's their stat, that's it, they're the best and whatnot. And then it's like you don't even watch the game. You don't even watch the game. You just want to see you just want to see your team win. You want to see your team as a 16, the other team as a 5, and your guy top fragged. That's all you care about.
The people on HLTV.org, no joke, they even brag about this. One of the features they do is like this feature, like one for the future. And all they do, no joke, is they essentially just look through their database for a player who's at like the third tier of competition where no one watches from the team. They just see the one who has the greatest, like craziest stats. And they just write like, oh, he is dominating there. So like maybe he'll be a really good pro one day. Yeah. They take 100 shots. And then when like 5 make it, they're like, what did I tell you? All I'm going to say is this, because I'm known to be like quite a harsh critic, because I want to hold people to a standard of greatness. Go and look in history who I ever said would be like the greatest players, the best players. This is mad. I almost never miss. Like my list of players, a fan once pointed this out to me. At the end of 2018, the HLTV list of the top 3 players in the world was Simple, Device, and Nico. If you went back in time, like 2 years before, those were the 3 people I was like, these are the best. And everyone was like, no, they're not. Device is a choker. Nico's only doing it because he's in a bad team. And Simple, like, just doesn't understand, like, sort of the game sense of the game.
The really Simple one just fucking belt with. Like, even in 2016, even when he was on that Liquid team, right? Or was that?
Yeah.
Even when he was in that 2016 Liquid team, you saw versus, when he was at MLG, right? You saw, you're like, dude, this guy, he's just so young. That's the only thing. He's young. He has some personality issues, but like, he's so young. He's got so much time to grow him on. He's already like the best player in this whole tournament, whatnot, except for Cold Zera, probably. But then, you see 2017, 28, just 2 years later, inarguably best player in the world, inarguably. And then, that point you always make about him where it's like every other best player of all time, Simple transcends esports, because every best player of all time, like Olaf Meister, they have a year and then they kind of get back to normal and then now they're Olaf Meister in phase. And then with Simple, it's like, wait, you're still getting 1.3.
We don't even know if he's had the best year yet, do we? That's how no, it's like this line that in this last season Aaron Rodgers said, which is low-key one of the coldest fucking lines of anyone in sports.
Yeah.
When they were talking about like, oh, and you had sort of a down year last year, but you've really come on strong. And he said, yeah, the thing about me is my down years tend to be career years for other people. That's cold as fuck, man.
There we go. And this to me, the saddest part, and I don't know if this phenomenon is reflected in other sports, but his Navi team, it's like the people say this in MMA about like people like Michael Johnson. It's like it's the worst best team because you watch like that nuke game that they have versus G2, I think on Saturday or whatever. You watch them, you're like, how the fuck are you winning rounds? Like you're running in, you like the team literally looks totally uncoordinated and whatnot, and then Simple does something amazing, and then they get some guns and the other guy's, you know, on an eco or whatever. And it's like, they're just winning by like hairs and by the other team making stupid mistakes. And the eye test is like, these guys should not be, you know, the number 2 team in the world.
Here's the sad thing. It ties into what I said before about how a ring does not equal a ring. It's like, who did you beat? What did you do? What did it take? Like, if you do some like shit like Kobe at the end of his career, Dirk Nowitzki when he won the championship, if you do the shit they did, that's like 3 rings worth, mate. You just get more than the other people do. Like, basically, in the case of Simple, I even came to this conclusion this year, and I can't believe no one ever said this before. No one figured this out. I actually hate his team, right? Because his team's an obvious prison. It's like someone literally said, listen, this person's going to be way too overpowered. So like a game designer. So how do we nerf it so he isn't just like always overpowered? Well, we'd put these players around that don't understand tactics. Then we'd have a coach that totally misuses them. And then we'd have people that are good enough to get in his team, but always let him down. And then he'd play amazingly when they play badly. What I realized is this, it's a fucked up epiphany. Like, as a person, I'd like him to win the major. I low-key hope he stays in this shit fucking team for as long as possible, because here's the thing, he wouldn't be doing that same stuff if he was in the best team. Like, for example, if he was in a team that just won the game 16-8 in Counter-Strike, you wouldn't get the extra 10 rounds where he does all the extra stuff, where he does all, you wouldn't get the 1v4s that he wins because he wouldn't be in a 1v2. So you actually wouldn't get to see how genius he is individually as much if he was in a bad team. Now, that's not the same as what people tried to do. Like, well, if I put this other player in it's like, no, they wouldn't do it, mate. Like, we all know that. They don't have that capacity. But basically, I sort of low-key want him to be in these flawed Na'Vi teams and then just one day win the major, and I don't care. I'll even do an article with this title, mate, just to rage everyone out. I'll just say, like, one Simple major is worth 5 for anyone else because of what it took to win.
You know, looking at it, it's like comically absurd for me when you watch Simple's career. You see him, it's like a myth where this guy is just in all these bad, flawed teams with terrible infrastructure and whatnot. I mean, he's going to go to the MIBR, which was going to be a disaster, right? And because you saw how that team turned out with Fallen Colds there, the whole internal crap. But he has all these terrible people around him, and he's still just like clawing these people up to first place finishes, being second in the world and whatnot. And it's incredible to watch. It's unbelievably inspiring.
Oh, for sure. This actually ties in how I've tried to do my career and what I was saying before about how you've got to like be driven from inside and just be trying to do your own thing your way and not worrying about like the conventions. Because basically another thing that would have held me way back in my esports career is if I'd have just looked at my peers and gone, I'm slightly in the lead, so I can chill now. It's like I never ever did that, because here's what I would do. I would look at my peers and go, they're all garbage. And then I would look at like some writer that's 1,000 times better than me and go, fucking hell, I'm so far behind. I'll not... Like, this guy's got a million. I better work on my shit. I better really level up if I want to ever do anything in this world. Yeah. Like, in the same sense, like, I always think this is like the same. If you ever go back in film history, what you find is this. Morons would do the same thing they do with sports stars. They'd go, you could take like an average NBA All-Star now and drop them in the 1960s. They'd drop 90 points. It's like, I don't think they would, mate. Like, I don't think you know how great the great players were back then. I agree. The base level of some of the other players might not have been as good, but you don't understand. Titans walked the earth back then. And so in that sense, right, if you go back in film history, you'll find that like the scripts get worse, the techniques are worse in cinema, the dialogue's obviously shit. It's like, oh, what are you doing, miss? Well, I don't know about that today. Like they're all fucking like reading the scripts, right? But you will get to some movie actors who it's like they didn't understand the idea of being in a race with their peers. They're already like as good as anyone ever. If you go and watch some motherfucker from like Orson Welles or something, it's like no one told this guy, like, you're not supposed to be this good, mate. Like, you do what the other people did. They just already would explore it if possible. You know, that's why people revere like Humphrey Bogart and stuff. You watch one of his movies, it's all, I mean, he's just metaphor because it's black and white, obviously. It's like he's in full vivid color and the rest of the scene's in black and white and the cardboard cut out. Like, everyone else is a joke in that movie. Right. He is embodying a character. Like, they transcend that sport in that particular regard. So that's the coolest thing about Simple to me. It's like he could literally play 70% as well as he is now. And in all the other great teams in history, that wins you the championship. It's like he actually has to sort of go 20 years into the future level to win now because of all the limitations around him. It's
cosmically unbelievable. It's just, it just transcends everything. It transcends, what you talk about, movie stars and whatnot. You can pick out people from every domain that existed in the future of the sport and whatnot, that existed in the future of the thing or whatever, the Titans and whatnot. Those are the people you learn from. Those are the people you get the life lessons from, big time. big
Or
time.
just get inspiration, you know. You just think to yourself, yeah, fuck, I should always like question what's possible. I should always think there's another level. I should never say, well, you're first and that means I'm the best, therefore I'm at the top. No, you're not. You're never at the top. There's no top. What the fuck is the top? The top's when you die, mate.
Right. Like when it's not public yet, but I'm working on doing some documentary film in the very near future. And I'm seeing so many holes with how other filmmakers kind of put out their work and whatnot. I feel the industry is it's stuck in a 20th century model in how you make money from film and whatnot. So I'm looking at internet marketers. I'm looking at entrepreneurs, content creators and whatnot. And I'm figuring out, okay, there's definitely better ways to monetize film than trying to make it at the film festival and whatever. Like it's really interesting to see and to incorporate the strategies and the tactics from other domains into yours, and you feel the system building up and you feel it kind of aligning and being like, oh, this is working. This is actually working.
I mean, that's another reason why you can't compartmentalize yourself, though.
Mm-hmm.
Like, basically, what all current people do is they all do essentially live within the framework that they are a specific type of a cog in a large machine. So, for example, I'm a really good musician. I just need a break in the industry. So what you mean is you want the fucking evil music industry to pick you as the next person they're going to exploit, ream you out completely, bastardize all your art, promote it in the most fucked way, debase you in every aspect, and at the end spit you out the other side, a dead drug addict that never fucking accomplished anything he dreamed of. No, instead, how about you take the genius that makes you an amazing guitar soloist? Why don't you start applying that to marketing? Why don't you figure out your angle? Maybe you can get you totally mega in that one area. Like, it's one of the areas where I remember a pickup artist guy said this in something I read years ago, maybe like 10 years ago. He said, if you can get really good at playing StarCraft, you can get really good at talking to women too. Like, a build order where it's like, I start with these units and he's going to do this order. Dude, that's like a conversation. It's like I start with this opening gambit and then I see what they respond here, and then that opens another flow chart. If you're just a nerd, that's a great way to get into it. Eventually you want it to become unconscious and it'll just flow intuitively, but as a starting point, it's a great framework to go with. And also, when you start playing StarCraft, you sure as fuck didn't go to the top of the ladder and win every game. You lost 1 million games to everyone, and you had all these times you were close but you fucked it up. Guess what? When you go and talk to girls, loads of them are going to shoot you down, loads of them are going to like this. That conversation's going well until this point, and then it drops off and you have to figure out what went wrong there, what would I do differently next time. Like, every field is the same. You go through failure to get to success.
The principles echo. This has been Arthaus with Thorin. Appreciate all you watching. Peace and love.